welcome and thank you for joining us today for this panel entitled Art and Commerce as part of the Art Salon program. I'm sitting here on stage with two artists, Andrew Norman Wilson and Christopher Kulendran Thomas. I will talk a little bit more about their background in a second. This panel investigates the relation between contemporary artistic production and commerce. Central to the talk is the question how the practice of artists today relates to the commercial realm and consumer culture. Of course, these realms influence each other greatly and are linked in many ways. This has always been the case, at least since we can talk about a consumer culture. And has been explored by many artists in various different ways, ranging from the experiments of Bauhaus and the obvious example of pop art to the works of the artist placement group, where artists were placed in commercial contexts and asked to generate work in that specific setting. Also, on a structural level, market logics and economic models have deeply informed the production, dissemination, and value of art. At the same time, the logic of the art system also affects the economy at large. The artist has become a model for the creative entrepreneur, well beyond the art world. Artistic labor is valued and used by companies to tackle problems creatively. Branded goods function according to the same logics as artworks by emphasizing symbolic value over use value. Today, however, with the rise of the internet and the commodification of virtually every aspect of everyday life, we see an increased interest in exploring commercial strategies from the perspective of artistic practice. The web has transformed the context for art, its currents, and networks. The circulation of images has intensified. Categories and labels proliferate in the flattening and accelerating streams of the likes as Tumblr, Facebook, and Instagram. Here, images accumulate importance through shares and likes, regardless who has made the images, where they're from, and for what they're made for. Gaining visual capital through proliferation rather than scarcity. The question is what kind of impact these new logics of dissemination and valuation have had on the works of artists, and how the collapse of contexts into one big social media feed impacts the way artists situate their work today. Looking at the work of a number of artists interested in internet culture, we see that brands, consumer goods, and logos play an important role in their work. These artists engage with consumer products on a formal level in their work, provoking question about the relationship between branded goods and art. Moreover, they use commercial dissemination tactics and integrate the aesthetic appeal and symbolic value of goods and brands in their practices. On today's panel, two artists, Christopher Kulendran Thomas and Andrew Norman Wilson, will present selected works that employ strategies and tactics commonly used by commercial entities and companies. Andrew Norman Wilson, I will say Norm from now on, will present one work in particular, his stock company called Salon, whereas Christopher will talk about two works, first about when platitudes become form, and then brace. And before we hear about these works, I just want to give you a little bit of background information on these artists. Christopher Kulendran Thomas is an artist based in London and Berlin. Since completing his MFA in Fine Art at Goldsmiths in 2012, His work has been presented recently in solo shows at Graupa Tuscany Zeidler Berlin, the Center for Contemporary Art Tel Aviv, and Mercer Union Toronto, and in many other exhibitions, including at Tate Liverpool and the CCS Bart Galleries New York. Andrew Norman Wilson is an artist based in New York. He holds an MFA from the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. Recent exhibition projects include Zone at Project Native Informant, that is actually currently on view, Material Uncertainty at Fluxia Milan, and Art Post Internet Allen Center for Contemporary Art Beijing, as well as Perspective Cinema at Centre Pompidou Paris, just to name a few. And with that, I would like to hand it over to you, Christopher. And Christopher will, as I said, present one work first, When Platitudes Become Form. After his presentation, you're very welcome to ask him questions specifically to the work before he will present his second work, and we will hear more from Norm as well.
Thank you, Melanie. Could we have the first slide up, please? There's a problem with the slide controller, so I'm going to have to use my inbuilt audio controller. I hope it doesn't get too tedious saying next after each slide. I would like to have a discussion with all of you here in the room about ongoing work still in progress that I'm somewhat uncomfortable about. My discomfort is hardly a surprise to me because I initiated this work in the first place to confront a deeply problematic situation. And it's this problem and the problems of the work that comes from it that I would like to discuss with all of you. We used to do group crits at art school where we present our work to be ripped apart by our assembled peers. And these crits were kind of famously brutal at Goldsmiths, where every time we presented our work, it was like being a human piñata. But I find that kind of format for discussion quite productive. And I think it's something to do with the power of numbers. I guess that's why juries are a sort of prevailing model in law. But there's something about a whole bunch of people responding to something that can, I think, get to the bottom of what's going on. And I'd like to do something like that here now. But that will require the generosity of all of you in being frank with your criticism where you feel it's required. And I should say that I won't consider any question or comment impolite. But first, I should introduce the work I'd like to discuss. The images that you will see are from an ongoing enterprise called When Platitudes Become Form. This is a platform to manipulate some of the cultural consequences of organized violence in Sri Lanka, where my family is from. The images I'll show you initially are from the gallery-cited dimension of this work. And these pieces are made by purchasing artworks by some of Sri Lanka's foremost young contemporary artists and then reconfiguring them for international circulation. Could we have the next slide, please? I'll just keep saying next. For example, this is a painting by Jagath Ravindra, which I have purchased from a gallery in Colombo, the capital of Sri Lanka. And then I've wrapped it in this blue plastic wrapping that is commonly used for transport, and then framed it with a pink Perspex frame. Could we go back to the last slide, please? This is a painting by Kumar Ratnayaka that I have purchased and then represented on a shelf with the composition of the painting added to with a fluorescent tube and lighting gel hanging from another shelf. Next. Thanks. Here, the sculpture that I've purchased is pimped up with pink expanding foam and encased in a one-way mirrored vitrine that produces a sort of infinity reflection. Next. And it kind of sits on a bed of fluorescent tubes. Next. This is a 4-channel video that I have made based on a sculpture that I've purchased. Next. The painting that you see behind these vertical blinds is by a young artist called Pramith Gikianaga, and that has been purchased from Saskia Fernando Gallery in Colombo. I believe Gikianaga is the gallery's youngest and newest signing. I've represented this painting behind these vertical blinds, so you can't really see it from head on, but as you walk past, the vertical blinds create a sort of zoetrope effect, so you see it in motion. Next. Here in the foreground is a sculpture that features the work next of Pragith Manohansa. This drawing is called Abstract Form, and I've simply abstracted that form into these 2 plasticine balls, one of which is on top of the work, which is on top of the shipping crate that is used to transport the show. The second, smaller, little baby plasticine ball has sound coming from inside it, and it's a kind of like minimal techno thing that's like muffled through the plasticine, but just about loud enough to dance to. Next. Next. So the drawing in the center of this composition is by a Sri Lankan artist called Pragith Manohansa, who is exactly the same age as me. And he's become a big deal in the new contemporary art boom that has happened in Sri Lanka over the last 4 or 5 years following the brutal end of the civil war there in what some would call a genocidal way. Here, Manohansa's drawing has been, I suppose, framed by being mounted on this stretched Nike T-shirt. Next. And that's framed with fluorescent perspex. Next. This is a detail of that work. Next. Pragith Manohansa is represented by Saskia Fernando Gallery, and that is Sri Lanka's first full-time professional commercial gallery. Next. Selling what is called for the first time in Sri Lanka contemporary art. Next. Saskia Fernando and the generation of new contemporary art galleries that have followed her in Colombo have been successful in the last few years as a result of the economic prosperity that has followed the genocidal violence, some would say, of 2009. Next. In Sri Lanka, the contemporary art boom has kind of very quickly established contemporary art, as in the rest of the world, as kind of the highest benchmark of connoisseurial consumerism in what is now one of the world's technically fastest growing economies, albeit from a low level and on a small scale. But there is no international market as yet, really, for this work. These artists, like Pragith Manohansa, have become successful in this new regional contemporary art boom, but their work doesn't necessarily really circulate internationally. My reformatting of Manohansa's work, I mean, the series that you see now has been exhibited, for example, at Tate in Britain and then acquired by the Sabludovich collection in London. And these are a sort of contexts in which Pragith Manohansa's work doesn't circulate, but similarly, there is no context for my work in Sri Lanka. And it's this kind of gap in systems of distribution that I'm setting out to exploit with this work. Next. This is a still from the online dimension of an online and offline platform for improvisation that is being developed through the ongoing work of When Platitudes Become Form, in collaboration with the curator Helen Kaplinsky and the Tamil TV presenters Sam and Rajitha Prathapan, who are Tamil, I suppose, TV celebrities. And we are working with Tamil groups around the world to develop a sort of globally networked version of a methodology for improvisation that was developed in the 1970s in Brazil called Forum Theatre. It was developed by a theatre activist called Augusto Boal, and it's a way for communities to address problems by, through improvisation. And it's been used to organize the workers' movement in Brazil, and a derivative of it called legislative theatre has been used to rewrite Brazilian laws. But the trouble with this kind of methodology to address what's happening in the north of Sri Lanka now is that it happens typically live in a room, and so we are developing or now prototyping a way for this to happen in a kind of globally networked, geographically dispersed way. And the institutional exhibitions of the gallery-sited work provide resources and space to develop that. Next. And then video from that also contributes to video work that's also shown in the gallery. Next. Here, paintings by a young Sri Lankan artist called Gayan Pragith are incorporated into my compositions with the addition of acrylic box frames. And next, Abercrombie and Fitch jeans. Next, incidentally, another sort of collateral consequence of the ongoing kind of organized state violence in Sri Lanka is expanded sweatshop production from international brands that include Nike and Abercrombie. Next. So I have no direct relationship with the artists whose work I purchase. I deal only with their commercial galleries. Next. In fact, maybe you could just keep cycling through these slowly. Maybe it's time to see if, as I hope, any of you have questions or problems. Oh, and please wait for the mic. Thanks. Yes.
My name is Agatha Wara. I guess I was just wondering, so you're purchasing these works from artists in Sri Lanka, and as you say, you're reconfiguring their works for contemporary art circulation. Do they at all find this exploitative, or what is your relationship with the artists that you purchase the work from?
I don't have any relationship with any of these artists, and I have been quite precise about maintaining that distance because I don't want to get into a situation of my work being informed by their intentions, in which case it could quite easily end up looking like some sort of equitable collaboration, and it certainly isn't. If it did look like that, then I'd end up playing the same sort of game of like cultural exchange that plenty of institutions around the world do in order to paper over the underlying asymmetric structuring of power anyway. So here, my interaction with these artists is purely commercial.
Have you been criticized for exploiting these artists or any kind of like exploitative remarks?
I think I probably am being now.
Not from me.
Anyone else at the back?
Hello, my name is Arta Ante, and actually I was wondering what is the difference between a normal art dealer? I mean, what is the new, or what is your contribution, so to say, and what is different from a classical art dealer? Because you're basically paying these artists for their work and they are selling it to the galleries, if I got that right.
That's right, yes. I suppose I'm mobilizing my own identity as an artist in order to add value by exploiting the difference between what counts as contemporary in one market and what counts as contemporary in my context, which is also the difference between where my family is from and my current context. So
you're basically defining what is contemporary on your own terms.
Well, the translation is something that I see not so much in terms of my own authorship or my own kind of flair for reconfiguring this work. I think it's more of a sort of almost algorithmic process, and by that I mean it's sort of semi-automated in that it's based on the kind of recurring tropes or memes that circulate in the context into which I'm working. But then, of course, the original work that I'm purchasing is also the product of a kind of slower process of mimetic circulation, or circulation of memes, from the Western art historical canon to Sri Lankan contemporary. So, I don't know, I mean, yeah, of course there is some, I mean, there's plenty of decision-making on my part, and of course that's, there's a degree of subjectivity in that, but I don't know if this is so much about my authorship as it is about, I don't know, intervening in these, in this circulation of memes.
I think we have time for one more question before we go to your next project, in order to not run out of time. Yeah.
Okay, I was wondering what happened to all these artists in Sri Lanka about their prices. I mean, did they go up, for instance, in their local markets? Because your work was sold to, I don't know, to Tate Modern, or was exposed to Tate Modern, and both by institutions?
Yeah, I mean, I don't really buy the idea that what I'm doing is necessarily helping the careers of these artists, because it's not really on their terms. I mean, for example, you saw a lot of works of mine in which I'm reconfiguring the work of Prageeth Manohansa, for example, right? And at this rate, I mean, the more that my work is taken up, the more I'm buying of his work. And at this rate, there's a very real chance that he could become one of Saskia Fernando's biggest selling artists, but not at all on his terms. It would be through my reformatting. And I'm kind of interested in that trajectory. I don't know how it'll pan out, but the more this goes, the more I think it will intensify the structural asymmetry between the materials of this work.
And with that, maybe we could go to the second project that you would like to present very shortly before going over to Norm.
Okay, yeah, maybe we could queue up the video, but not play it just yet. This, what I'm about to show you is from a collaboration with my colleague Annika Kuhlmann, who's based in Berlin, and it is a brand called Brace that we have founded, and it happens to be registered in, well, kind of offshore, as it were, in Sri Lanka, in one of the new free trade zones there, which have been set up to exploit international investment, and it's exactly that investment that is keeping the totalitarian regime there, at least under a sort of illusion of democracy, going in Sri Lanka. But actually, how the company's set up is kind of incidental, because Brace is international in scope, and its purpose, I suppose, is to, well, I should tell you what it is. It's a luxury brand for safety equipment, and I guess our purpose is something to do with, fetishizing the aesthetics of safety in what we see as our prevailing economy of fear, in order to maybe reimagine the possibilities of intensified consumption. So our first product is a Nautical Buoyancy ring, which is gold-plated and clad in black mesh and neoprene. That was launched recently at a show organized by DIS in New York, and we're now following that with various other safety products, including a fire extinguisher, and then anti-radiation headgear, and eventually we're working towards a fashion range made with Kevlar body armor. And the only retail context in which our products will be available are as sculptural components in our gallery shows. And the context of art, we think, provides for us the most sort of targeted retail context for this luxury brand. So I'll show you quickly the ad for the launch of Brace, which in which you will see and hear my colleague Annika Kuhlmann. If we can play that, please.
When life came ashore millions of years ago, it brought a piece of the ocean with it to a land filled with things that brought fluidity. Now the tides are rising. Signs of the flood are everywhere. Slowly, the ocean absorbs the sun and its darkened complexion. Before the wave arrives, the ocean recedes, leaving nothing but sand. The seagull dips its wings in dark pools as we accelerate over dust hills back towards the ocean and into a world of pure fluidity. Wait for the wave. Embrace the catastrophe or drown in its undertow. In the face of the sublime wave, we swim out into the last light to glimpse for a brief moment the penetrating truth of the world, the persistent, indifferent circling of the planets, relentless darkness. Wait for the wave. Brace, brace.
Okay. Thank you so much, Christopher. I think we will, without further questions, we will go to Norm, and then we will have time to discuss this work as well as the other work more in the context of the talk, namely to relate it to what these works actually do in a commercial context and why they engage and how they engage in that context. And now Norm will mainly refer to one project of his called Zone. It's a stock company, and he will tell us more about that.
Thank you, Melanie. So I'm going to talk about a project of mine called Zone, and I want to start by saying that I feel a significant amount of anxiety and uncertainty on a regular basis in relation to what could be called my economic activity, the things I produce, my personal finances, global finance, and the people I work with, who are often also the people I love. I say this not to solicit pity from you all, but to generate some honest common ground with those of you who can relate. I think this is an exciting and generative starting point for the production of culture. This entanglement of one's sense of self and one's position within an economy or field, one's emotions and one's work or bank account balance, or inaccessible forms of financial abstraction, is what Zone emerged from. Like most entrepreneurial pursuits, Zone is partially motivated by the struggle for self-preservation. So far, the project has afforded me months of life on Earth in which I'm able to negotiate the terms of my production in collaboration with people I deeply respect, offering much more freedom than when I've worked for companies or teach in higher education. So, to survive, I teach, I sell work, I produce commercial video, I do residencies while renting my downtown Manhattan apartment room through Airbnb for profit and more, such as Dog Vacay, which is like being a host on Airbnb, but the guests are dogs, and you don't have to leave your room, you actually get to temporarily have dogs. So, in a way, Zone is a process of formalizing segments of my economic activity as a contractual laborer, and this process, while beyond spectatorship, as Christopher would put it, is artistic content. But what is Zone? Zone is a creative agency that helps businesses and consumers reimagine our current economic situation. I direct Zone, and it operates on a contract-to-contract basis with a team of freelance artists and thinkers. Our core function is to serve global markets of communicators in advertising, business, art, and journalism with high-quality, pre-trend stock photo and video clips that circulate both on the art market and on the stock media market through sites like Getty Images. These clips are based on the idea that current offerings of stock imagery through those marketplaces typically present a limited scope of activity, situations, and identity stereotypes. Zone seeks to create alternative representations of finance and business. Early in 2008, when Getty Images launched their financial services paper, there were already signs that businesses in the financial sector were shifting their messages and visual language to reflect an emerging downturn. While positive escapism may be a real trend in other sectors, financial services have recognized that they can no longer credibly sell daydreams. They feel the need to be in touch with the challenging reality their customers face. Gone are the depictions of aspiration and conspicuous wealth, as financial services brands try to reestablish trust with their customers. But credibility is dwindling. Economic confidence in general is net negative in almost all European countries. Germany is the only European country that improved from a negative score in 2009 to a positive score in 2012. According to a Gallup poll from last year, or just over a year ago, Americans' confidence in U.S. banks was recently at a record low, 21%. The percentage of Americans saying they have a great deal or quite a lot of confidence in U.S. banks is now about half the pre-recession level of 41%, recorded in June 2007. In many instances, financial marketers aren't hitting the right note. Those that say, believe in us, or we have all the answers, without the data explaining why, isn't credible given all the wreckage. Others feel it's comforting for consumers to be treated candidly. We're in uncharted waters. We're doing our best. We want to hear your questions. We're here to help you. They feel this adds credibility. Salon offers products geared towards changing the conversations and dreams we have about our economy. We aim to take themes of uncertainty, discontent, and absurdity from the realm of fringe critical discussion of the economy and place them squarely into the mainstream institutional discussion of what our financial lives look and feel like. Salon presents products that fill a gap in the existing stock imagery market, that gap being the lack of imagery representing distrust of banks and finance. The potential, then, is for a rebranding of the financial industry as a responsive entity that understands consumers' uncertainty and the uncertainty inherent within it. It all starts with an idea. This is an image concept slide designed by Yulia Trubetskaya and I that presents one of Salon's image concepts. These images are made to circulate freely online, both as open source image ideas, but also proposals to attract investors to the project. So far, 3 have been funded, 1 by Impact in the Netherlands and 2 by Project Native Informant in London. In investing in an image concept, the investor is basically covering the total production costs. So once the video is complete, it is then sold on the art market as an edition video and uploaded to stock media marketplaces such as Getty Images, Pond5, and Dis Images. The videos are basically identical for both settings. They're just packaged differently and offer different usage rights, different use values, and different meanings. Returns from sales on both the art market and the stock media market are then split between the investor and I, according to our agreement. So that's another version of the invisibility cloaked hand gestures. And another.
Norm, I think we need to speed it up just a little bit.
Sure. And then another bank one. So, back into the presentation. Okay, so Salon is on view right now at Project Native Informant in London and features the 2 videos they invested in. Both videos deal with transparency and opacity in relation to finance and multimedia software. Also inhabiting the gallery space are works called risk prevention investment objects. The objects themselves prevent bodily risk in relation to speed and vision. A high-end paintball mask that protects the eyes from paintballs, a luxury car headlight that brightens a dark road, a private aircraft windshield that affords the pilot visibility and protection. Directly engraved onto the surface of each object is one of Sohn's image concepts. The objects are unique, and returns from sales are used to sustain Sohn. They're displayed on pedestals made of anti-static packaging foam. Once the object is sold, the pedestal is cut in half, a cavity is hollowed out, and the object is placed in the cavity for shipment and/or storage. And I think I'll wrap it up there for questions.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So I think we have seen in both of the presentations that both of you kind of leap out to the commercial realm and use different tactics in different ways to present your work beyond the art context. With you, Norm, it's through the use of the Getty image platform and through the employment of investors. And with you, Christopher, it's for one with your luxury line that you actually produce goods for consumption. But then on the other hand side, you also act as an art dealer that kind of like inserts himself in the circulation of art as goods. So I was wondering, maybe to start the discussion, what makes that interesting for you? Why putting yourself in that context?
I guess as I sort of mentioned, one of the initial drives was like, oh, maybe my job can be making art. And so, working commercially through this project affords me that for certain periods of time at least. But then there's also, I think, the potential to create something that totally functions on a stock media marketplace and can totally function in a commercial gallery in London. And I'm interested in how it can sort of serve both roles and both platforms will accept, and thinking about not how it's not different, but how there's sort of like it's like a Venn diagram or overlapping spheres of, use value or function.
Do you speak differently to the different audiences or buyers? Do you use different arguments?
Because with Getty, I just kind of upload them, and the text that's there is the title. But then I have tags, keywords that I still have to add to those, actually. I'd say they're very similar, yeah.
And you also use art historical references, right? And that's a common tool to kind of enhance the symbolic value of an artwork. So that is probably one aspect that you take from the art system, whereas other aspects such as the language that you use is clearly derived from the Getty image system, right?
Right, yeah.
And then coming to you, Christopher, if you would like to answer that question, why this leap? Why are you engaging with why do you produce goods instead of art? But then you sell them in an art context. That would be my first question, referring to Brace. And then the second question, why are you engaging in the art market also in the form of buying artworks and then reselling them, inserting yourself in the distribution mechanisms rather than sticking to your profession as an artist to produce art?
When Platitudes Become Form started as a way for me to kind of come to terms with the difference between where my family is from and where I am now, and I wouldn't feel okay doing that with contemporary art sort of logic of multiculturalism that typically projects a sort of platform of theoretical equality where references can come from everywhere and can be combined or appropriated in this, like, at least conceptually, equal platform. That doesn't ring true to my experience of the difference between my family's origins and my current context. And so in order to kind of confront the reality of that, I think I have to engage the reality of what art can actually do. And contemporary art, which I'm beginning to understand as a potentially limited art historical condition, requires this sort of suspension of disbelief, where we are almost required to buy into this idea that that our interpretation is its only consequence. So contemporary art requires the viewer to complete it, and that's what it's for. And in reality, art has always been made by its world, and it's always made its contiguous reality in all sorts of ways, structurally, institutionally, infrastructurally, economically. But all of those ways in which art actually makes the world are typically disavowed in favor of prioritizing art's consequences only for our interpretation. And so I guess I wanted to engage with what art can actually do.
Does that also tie in? I recently read a statement of yours where you say that you want to approach art in an ecological sense. Does that also tie into that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this comes from a sort of way of understanding our place in the world ecologically, and by that I mean in relation to our interdependencies, and beyond this sort of phony binary between mankind and everything that's not mankind. I'm interested in thinking about what art could be beyond this. What I think is maybe like one of the biggest religious myths of our time, which is that mankind is an ontologically superior category.
Okay, before launching too much into this area, I would actually like to go back to these objects that we see on the screen, these objects that you have on view currently in your show in London. And actually, they seem to work in a similar fashion that the products of the of Brace seem to work. Can you relate to that and describe what you intend with these objects? Do we need to approach them also as luxury goods? Do we see them as sculptures? How do they function and how do they work?
They're fragments of sort of functional products like a car or a private aircraft or, paintball gear. And so I don't see them as things that people will actually use. They're more sort of like signals or symbols of this idea of bodily risk. And then I kind of like conflate the idea of the art object as some sort of low-risk investment. And so it is a luxury product in a way. It's an art object. Yeah, I guess that's how I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
Do you see it as a sort of diffusion line of Sewn?
Yeah. I think Sewn's kind of changing. There's going to be some writing produced, and I don't know. I kind of want to make Ryanair barf bags next, and so yeah, I think that we'll see more than just stock media coming out. No one take that idea, please. I shouldn't have even said it.
And with that, we are almost out of time. We have maybe time for one or two questions from the audience, and then we actually already need to close the discussion. So if you have a question, please ask it now. Yep. One question, yeah.
My question is for the first thing that you showed, the production of images for financial institutions. I mean, it has an economical financial background, and it's a product in itself. and then it is sold in commercial galleries as an artwork. So isn't it something tricky and very difficult for the galleries to sell, because it is not art produced for the sake of art, but it is in the beginning a functional, economical, and financial product?
Not sure what you mean.
What I mean is the two videos that you showed.
Yeah.
They were produced as additional alternative images for finance companies to use in their commercials or in their images.
Yeah.
So it has a commercial background. It has a commercial purpose. Then these videos became artworks and are sold or presented in art galleries. Right? So isn't it tricky and difficult for the art gallery to sell it as an artwork because it is first produced as a commercial item for a yeah?
The rights, the conditions of use are different in both settings, and so when you buy it from Getty, the way in which you're allowed to use it, though infinity people can buy it, there are certain restrictions on how people can use it. Whereas through an art gallery, all three videos are sort of together, and so it is different in a way. It's more of a package, and there's an addition of three, and it'll come on like the custom hard drive that people seem to like when they're buying video. So I don't think, Stefan at Project Native Informant didn't see a problem with it, but yeah, maybe there is. But anyone can download the videos online usually, like Vdrome has, yeah.
So with that, I think we need to conclude the discussion, even though I feel we could talk about this much longer. I hope we could give you a little bit of an insight how the commercial and the art system actually are intertwined and work more in an ecological sense than as separate systems. And with that, I would like to thank Claudio Vogt for having us here today, and I would like to thank Norm and Christopher. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you.